He slapped her, and they already had papers. Wait, was this planned or something worse?
My mom reached for my newborn, and when I pulled him back, my dad stood up and slapped me across the face. We were in a private dining room mid-dinner, surrounded by people I barely knew. I was holding my 3-week-old son, still recovering, still shaking, and somehow everyone else at that table was acting like this was normal. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. My parents had invited strangers, complete strangers, and were trying to hand my baby over like he didn't belong to me, like I didn't get a say. Like this had already been decided behind my back. Then the woman stepped closer anyway, smiling, and my mom said, calm as ever, don't make this harder than it has to be. That's when I reached into my bag, dialed one number, and waited. My mom reached for my newborn, and when I pulled him back, my dad stood up and slapped me across the face. We were in a private dining room mid-dinner, surrounded by people I barely knew. I was holding my 3-week-old son, still recovering, still shaking, and somehow everyone else at that table was acting like this was normal. My parents had invited strangers, complete strangers, and were trying to hand my baby over like he didn't belong to me, like I didn't get a say. Like this had already been decided behind my back. Then the woman stepped closer anyway, smiling, and my mom said, calm as ever, don't make this harder than it has to be. That's when I reached into my bag, dialed one number, and waited. I didn't look at anyone after that. Not my mom, not my dad, not the woman still standing way too close, like she was just waiting for me to hand him over. I just held Noah tighter. He was still crying small, sharp sounds against my chest, and I could feel his heartbeat racing through the thin fabric of his blanket. My cheek was still stinging from the slap, the heat spreading across my face, but I didn't touch it. I didn't react. I couldn't afford to. Because the second I reacted, they'd think they still had control. Lena, my mom said again, softer this time, like she was the reasonable one in the room, like I was the problem. You're upsetting him. I let out a quiet breath, steadying myself. He's crying because strangers are trying to take him, I said, my voice low, but it didn't shake. That seemed to irritate my dad more than if I'd yelled. Victor Carter didn't like being challenged. Not in public, not ever. He adjusted his cuffs slowly, like he hadn't just hit his daughter in the face, like that moment had already passed, already been justified in his mind. You're not thinking clearly, he said. Calm, controlled. We've been over this. No, we hadn't. That was the part that kept repeating in my head. We've been over this. Except no one had ever actually asked me. I finally looked around the table again. My aunt sat stiffly, eyes locked on her plate. My cousin wouldn't meet my gaze. At the far end, a man in a suit, my parents' lawyer, was quietly closing a folder, like the conversation was already wrapping up. And then there was her, Margaret. Perfect posture, perfect smile, hands still loosely clasped in front of her like she was being patient, like this was just a small delay in something inevitable. You're scaring her, she said gently, nodding toward me, but her eyes flicked down to Noah. Not me. Never me. My mom gave a small, reassuring laugh. She's just overwhelmed. It's been a difficult few weeks. I'm not overwhelmed, I said immediately. Too quickly. Too sharply. And that's when I saw it, the look my dad gave the lawyer. A subtle nod, like a signal. My stomach dropped. Lena, my mom continued, her tone shifting again, firmer now. We talked about what's best for him. No, I said. You talked about what you wanted. The air in the room changed. It got heavier, tighter. No one was pretending anymore. My dad leaned forward slightly, his voice lower now, meant only for me, but everyone could hear it. This isn't a discussion. My grip tightened around Noah. Then what is it? For a second, No one answered. And that silence that was worse than anything they'd said so far, because it told me everything. This wasn't a suggestion. This wasn't concern. This wasn't help. This was already decided. I looked down at the table, and that's when I noticed it again. The folder, partially open now. Inside, I caught a glimpse of printed text, signatures, and my name. My full name. Next to a line I didn't remember signing. My chest tightened. "You went through my things," I said slowly. My mom didn't deny it. "We had to," she replied. "You weren't being cooperative." Cooperative. Like I was the obstacle. Like Noah wasn't even mine to protect. The woman Margaret took another small step forward. "I understand this is emotional," she said gently, "but I promise you he'll have everything he could ever need." I stared at her. "You mean with you?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That silence confirmed it more than words ever could. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of a chair shifting someone uncomfortable, maybe thinking this had gone too far. But still, no one stopped it. No one said a word, except my dad. "Time is being wasted," he said flatly. "Hand him over." My pulse was pounding now, but I stayed completely still. Because I wasn't waiting for them anymore. I was waiting for the clock. 10 minutes had already passed. I knew that because I'd been counting every second since I made that call. Every tick of silence stretched the tension tighter. My mom noticed it too. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice quieter now. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. And, for the first time that night, she looked unsure. Another few minutes passed. No one touched me again. No one tried to grab Noah. Even Margaret had stopped moving, her hands now slowly lowering to her sides. The confidence in the room was slipping, cracking. My dad checked his watch, then looked at me. "Who did you call?" he asked, still calm but not as controlled as before. I held his gaze, and for the first time since he hit me, I spoke without hesitation. "You'll see." That's when it happened. From somewhere beyond the dining room, a loud noise. Sharp, sudden, the sound of doors slamming open, voices, multiply, fast, urgent. Everyone at the table froze. My dad stood up again, but this time, not to intimidate me, to look toward the entrance. Footsteps rushed closer, and then the doors to the private room burst open. The night before that dinner, I couldn't sleep. Not because of Noah, he was actually quiet for once, curled against me in the dim light of my childhood bedroom, but because something felt off. Not loud, not obvious, just this constant pressure sitting in my chest like I was missing something important. Like everyone else already knew something I didn't. 2 weeks earlier, I had moved back into my parents' house. It wasn't part of some big plan. It just happened. My pregnancy hadn't exactly been stable, and after Noah was born, everything felt like it was collapsing at once. No job, no partner, no real support system outside of them. And my parents had been very clear. "Come home," my mom had said. "We'll take care of everything." At the time, it sounded like relief. Now, it felt like a trap I didn't notice closing. At first, it was small things. My mom, Diane, insisted on helping with Noah constantly. Feeding schedules, sleep routines, doctor appointments. She had an opinion about everything, and if I disagreed, she'd just smile and say, "You'll understand eventually." Like I wasn't already his mother. My dad, Victor, was different. He didn't hover. He didn't offer advice. He just watched, quiet, observant, stepping in only when something didn't go the way he expected. And when he did speak, people listened, including me. That was the part I hated admitting. A few days after I moved in, my mom started bringing up paperwork. At first, it sounded harmless. Just in case something happens, she said casually while folding laundry, we should make sure Noah's protected. I didn't think much of it. Legal stuff always sounded more complicated than it actually was. But then it kept coming up. Guardianship, temporary arrangements, backup plans. Each time, I said no. Each time, she'd let it go a little too easily. That should have been the first real warning. Then came the conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. Late one night, I was in the hallway with Noah, trying to get him back to sleep, when I heard voices downstairs. My parents. She's not ready, my mom was saying. She doesn't need to be ready, my dad replied. She just needs to cooperate. I froze halfway down the stairs. She's already pushing back, my mom added. If she refuses, she won't, my dad cut in. Not if we handle it properly. Handle it. Like I was a situation. A problem to manage. I stepped back before they could see me, my heart racing, Noah stirring in my arms. I told myself I was overthinking it, that they were just worried, that this was what parents did. But after that, things didn't feel the same. My phone suddenly stopped working properly, calls dropping, messages not sending. When I asked about it, my mom said, "Oh, your father changed the plan. It's more secure now." More secure? For who? Then there were the documents. One afternoon, while my mom was out, I found a folder on the kitchen counter. It wasn't hidden, it was just left there, like someone forgot about it. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside were forms, legal forms. My name was on them. So was Noah's. And buried in the text, words that made my stomach drop. Transfer of custodial right. I flipped through the pages faster, my hands starting to shake, but the last few pages were missing, like someone had removed the part I needed most. That's when I heard the front door open. I barely had time to close the folder before my mom walked in. She saw it immediately. Her eyes flicked from the folder to me, and for just a second, her expression changed. Not surprised, not angry. Calculated. You shouldn't go through things you don't understand, she said calmly, setting her purse down. I stared at her. What is this? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she walked past me, picked up the folder, and closed it properly. We'll talk about it tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow? I repeated. That's why we're having dinner, she replied, already turning away. Everything will make sense then. That was it. No explanation. No reassurance. Just a promise that tomorrow would explain everything. And standing there in that kitchen, holding my son, staring at a folder I wasn't supposed to see, I realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't about helping me. This was about taking him. The next evening, when they told me to get ready formal clothes, no questions, I didn't argue. Because by then, I needed to see how far they were willing to go, and who exactly they thought they were giving my child to. By the time we arrived at the restaurant, I already knew this wasn't a conversation. It was a setup. The private dining room was at the back, quiet, closed off, too formal for something that was supposed to be family. My mom walked in first, like she owned the space. My dad followed, steady and unreadable. And then I stepped inside and saw her. Margaret was already seated, not waiting to be introduced, not unsure or awkward, comfortable, like she belonged there. She stood when we entered, smoothing out her dress, her expression soft but practiced. "Lena," she said, like she'd been expecting me specifically. "It's so nice to finally meet you." Finally, that word stuck. I didn't respond right away. I just held Noah a little closer and took in the rest of the room. My aunt, my cousin, my parents' lawyer. Everyone was already seated. Everyone was already in position. "You can sit," my mom said, gesturing to the chair across from Margaret. Not next to her, across from her, like this was a negotiation. I sat slowly, my body tense, my mind already racing ahead of the moment. Noah shifted in my arms, making a small sound, and Margaret's eyes immediately dropped to him, locked onto him. Not me. Never me. Dinner started like nothing was wrong. Plates were served, drinks were poured, small talk floated around the table like a thin layer trying to cover something much heavier underneath. Margaret spoke the most. She talked about her home, her schedule, her preparations. "I've already arranged a nursery," she said at one point, smiling softly. I didn't want to wait. My hand tightened around Noah's blanket. "You arranged a nursery," I repeated. She nodded, completely at ease. "Of course." Like that made sense. Like that was normal. I looked at my parents. Neither of them corrected her. Neither of them even reacted. That's when the realization stopped being a suspicion and became something solid. This wasn't hypothetical. This wasn't planning. This was already happening. "I think we should move forward," my dad said suddenly, cutting through the room. The shift was immediate. The lawyer straightened slightly, opening the folder in front of him. Papers slid into view, clean, organized, prepared. My name was on them again. So was Noah's. "This outlines the arrangement," my dad continued, his voice calm, controlled. "It ensures stability, opportunity, a future that you're not in a position to provide right now." There it was. Not concern, judgment. Final? I felt something in my chest tighten, but I didn't look away from the papers. "What kind of arrangement?" I asked. Even though I already knew. My mom answered this time. "A private adoption," she said gently. Adoption. The word hit harder than the slap that came later. "Because this was planned, discussed, agreed on. Without me. You don't get to decide that," I said, my voice low but steady. My dad didn't even blink. "We already have," he replied. And then he added something that made the entire room feel like it dropped out from under me. "The financial side has been handled." I looked at him. What does that mean? No one answered immediately. But they didn't need to. Because the lawyer didn't deny it. Because my mom didn't correct it. Because Margaret didn't look confused. They all knew exactly what that meant. Money had changed hands. For my son. "You sold him?" The words came out before I could stop them. My mom's expression tightened. "Don't say it like that." "How should I say it?" I shot back. Margaret leaned forward slightly, her tone still soft but firmer now. "This is about giving him a better life." I laughed, but there was nothing amused about it. "You mean with you." Silence. Again. That same silence. And that's when she stood up, slowly, carefully, and took a step toward me. "I think it's time," she said. My mom nodded. "Just hand him over." Everything after that, the crying, my refusal, my dad standing up, it all crashed together in seconds. And then his hand hit my face. The room went still. No one moved. No one spoke. Not even me. Because in that moment, I realized something even worse than what they'd done. They really believed I wouldn't stop them. And as I reached into my bag, dialing that number, my dad leaned in close, his voice low enough that only I could hear it. "Whoever you just called," he said quietly, "won't help you." I looked up at him, and for the first time that night, I almost smiled. The room didn't recover after the slap. It just stalled. Like everything had already gone too far, but no one knew how to step back. No one reached for me again. Not my mom, not Margaret, not even my dad. But that didn't make it better, because the silence wasn't hesitation. It was calculation. I stayed exactly where I was, one arm wrapped tightly around Noah, the other resting against the table. My cheek still burned, but I ignored it. The only thing that mattered now was keeping my breathing steady, keeping him calm. Because the second I looked shaken, really shaken, they'd use it. "She's not stable," my dad would say. "She's overwhelmed," my mom would add. They'd already written that version of me. I wasn't going to play into it. Noah's cries softened slightly, turning into small, uneven breaths against my chest. I adjusted the blanket around him carefully, deliberately, every movement controlled. Across from me, Margaret had stopped pretending to be calm. Her hands were no longer folded. Her posture wasn't perfect anymore. She was watching my parents now, waiting for them to fix this, but even they didn't look as certain as they had before. My mom's eyes kept flicking toward the door. My dad checked his watch again. Then again, "You're making a mistake," he said finally, his voice quieter now but sharper. "Whatever you think you're doing." "I'm not thinking," I cut in. That made him stop. I already did. For a second, no one spoke. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his seat, adjusting the papers in front of him, but he didn't touch them again. The folder stayed open, exposed now, like something no one wanted to claim anymore. Margaret took a small step back. Just one, but it was enough. That confidence she walked in with, it was cracking. My mom noticed it too. "Everything is fine," she said quickly, her tone aimed more at Margaret than me. "This is just a delay." A delay. Like I was a schedule issue. Like my son was still part of some timeline they controlled. I let out a slow breath and leaned back slightly in my chair. And that's when I saw it clearly. The shift. Not in them. In the room, the staff outside had gone quiet. Too quiet. Even through the closed doors, something felt different. The low hum of the restaurant voices, dishes, movement had thinned out, like something was approaching. My dad noticed it next. His head turned slightly toward the door. Then, faintly, sedence, distant, but getting closer. My mom's face changed instantly. "What did you do?" she asked again, sharper this time. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because now they were starting to understand. The lawyer closed his folder completely this time, pushing it a few inches away from himself, like he didn't want to be connected to it anymore. Margaret took another step back, then another. "I wasn't told this would be complicated," she said, her voice no longer steady. My dad stood up again, but not like before. Not controlled, not composed. This time, it was abrupt, tense. "You need to sit down," he snapped at her. But she didn't move, because now the power in the room wasn't his anymore. The sirens were louder. Right outside, stopping. Doors somewhere in the building slammed open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, fast, purposeful. My mom grabbed the edge of the table. "Victor." "I've got it," he said quickly, but there was something off in his voice now, something thinner, less certain. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at the door, because he knew. They all did. Whatever control they thought they had, it was gone. The footsteps got closer. Right outside the private room, Noah stirred again in my arms, letting out a soft cry, but this time I didn't try to quiet him immediately. I just held him and waited. My dad took one step toward the door, like he could intercept whatever was about to happen, like he could still manage it, control it, rewrite it. But he didn't get the chance, because in the next second, the doors burst open, and everything changed. The doors didn't just open, they slammed against the walls hard enough to echo through the entire room. 3 uniformed officers stepped in first. Right behind them was a woman in a dark blazer, badge clipped at her waist, eyes scanning the room in one sharp sweep before landing directly on me, on Noah. "Is this your child?" she asked. Her voice cut clean through the tension. No hesitation. No softness. Just authority. "Yes," I said immediately, tightening my hold on him. She nodded once, then turned slightly to the officers. "No one touches her or the baby." That was it. That one sentence. And the entire balance of power in the room flipped. My dad froze mid-step. "Excuse me," he started, trying to regain control, that familiar tone creeping back in. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," the woman cut him off. She stepped further into the room, pulling a small folder from under her arm. I'm with Child Protective Services, she said, and we've received a report of an attempted unlawful transfer of custody involving a minor. Silence, heavy, immediate, final. My mom's hand dropped from the table. Margaret didn't say a word. She just stepped back again, putting physical distance between herself and everyone else, like that alone could separate her from what was happening. That's ridiculous, my dad said, but there was strain in his voice now. We're the grandparents. We're acting in the child's best interest. The CPS agent didn't even look at him when she responded. Without the mother's consent? She asked. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. She turned to me again. Did you agree to any transfer of custody? No, I said. Clear, steady. Did you sign any documents willingly? No. That was all she needed. She nodded toward one of the officers, who stepped forward immediately. We're going to need everyone to remain where they are, the officer said. And just like that, the room that had felt so controlled, so staged, so carefully arranged, fell apart. My dad tried one more time. You don't understand. I understand enough, the agent said sharply, finally turning to face him fully. We also have evidence of financial exchange tied to this arrangement. That landed harder than anything else. My mom's face drained of color. Margaret's composure cracked completely. I was told this was legal, she said quickly, her voice tight now. I was told everything had been approved. By who? The agent asked. Margaret hesitated. Just long enough. The agent nodded slightly, like that silence confirmed more than words ever could. Behind them, another officer was already speaking quietly into a radio. The lawyer, who had been silent the entire time, finally stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I think you should sit down, the officer nearest him said firmly. And he did, immediately. New argument. No authority left. I felt something in my chest finally start to loosen. Not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to feel something other than that tight, suffocating pressure that had been building for days. Weeks. My mom looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not like I was confused. Not like I was overwhelmed. But like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. You did this, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. No, I replied. My voice didn't shake. You did this. Her expression shifted anger, disbelief, something sharper underneath, but she didn't get to say anything else. Because one of the officers stepped forward, Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us. For what? She snapped. For questioning. My dad stepped in immediately. You can't just... Yes, we can, the officer said flatly, and just like that, they were no longer in control of anything. Not the conversation, not the room, not the outcome. Margaret was escorted out first. She didn't argue, didn't look at me, didn't even look at Noah. Whatever version of this she believed in, it was gone now. My parents were next. My dad tried to hold on to his composure, but it was slipping. Small cracks showing in the tightness of his jaw, the way his hands flexed at his side. My mom didn't look at me again. Not once. And then they were gone. The room felt empty. Not quiet, just different. Like all the pressure had been sucked out of it at once. The CPS agent turned back to me, her tone softer now. You did the right thing calling this in. I nodded, but the movement felt distant. Because now that it was over, my body was catching up. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight, and before I could stop it, I started crying. Not loud, not dramatic. Just release. Everything I had been holding in since the moment I saw that folder, since I heard those conversations, since I realized what they were planning, it all hit at once. I've got you, I whispered to Noah, pressing my cheek gently against his head. He was quiet now. Calm. Safe. That was all that mattered. The investigation moved fast after that. faster than I expected. The recordings I had, conversations between my parents, discussions about handling me, about money, about timing, they were enough. The photos of the documents, the messages, everything I had collected in those quiet moments when I wasn't sure if I was overreacting, it all mattered. It all proved exactly what this was. Not concern, not help, control, and a transaction. My parents were formally charged. Conspiracy, coercion, fraud. The word times, trafficking times, came up too. Not in a dramatic way, just clinically, legally, but it landed all the same. Margaret's situation unraveled quickly. She claimed she thought it was a private adoption, just faster, more discreet. But the evidence didn't support that. She knew enough to question it. She just didn't. The lawyer lost everything. License suspended pending investigation. His name attached to every document, every signature, every decision. As for the rest of the family, they disappeared. Not physically, but from me, calls stopped. Messages went unanswered because silence was easier than admitting they had seen it happening and said nothing. A few weeks later, everything felt different. Not fixed, not perfect, but mine. I was in a small apartment, nothing like my parents' house. No polished floors, no long dining tables, just quiet and space and control. Noah was asleep beside me, his tiny chest rising and falling steadily. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from my attorney. Full legal custody confirmed, all claims dismissed, protective orders in place. I stared at the screen for a long second, then set it down, slowly, carefully, like it mattered. Because it did, I leaned back, exhaling a breath I felt like I'd been holding for weeks. Then I looked at Noah, really looked at him. No pressure, no eyes watching, no one waiting to take him. Just mine. I brushed my fingers lightly across his cheek. And quietly, so only he could hear, I said, "No one decides your life but me." And this time, there was no one left to argue.
If your own parents did this, would you see the signs in time?